Today, I've got a selection of two games for you because I really wanted to go over a little bit of a point, I guess. I found myself last night scrolling through the list of ships trying to figure out what I wanted to play in order to record some content, and I happened to glance over the Tier 6 Premium Italian Destroyer FR-25, which I remember giving a positive review on when it first debuted only a couple months or a couple weeks ago. It was only in the past couple updates. And I thought at the time the ship was pretty good. But then again, this was one of the ships that I picked up, played in order to get a review, and then didn't touch again because there's just new content coming into this game all the time. So, do I still stand by my original assessment? Well, yes, I very much do. I still think the FR-25 is a fantastic Tier 6 premium destroyer. In fact, I think I might have actually underrated it the first time around. This thing is great. It's different, too, from the Techline Italian destroyers, and that's kind of what you want in a premium. You see, everybody knows the Paolo Emilio, right? The legendary tier Italian destroyer. I think you can buy it in the store for global XP. When that debuted as the first Italian destroyer in the game, its gimmick was that it was designed for YOLO runs. It had a rolling smokescreen generator, it's very fast, and its torpedoes hit like nuclear missiles, although they only have a 6 kilometer range. So the idea is you deploy that rolling smokescreen as you're charging toward a battleship at 45 knots, and then while you're concealed in the smokescreen, you can get point blank torpedo salvos on the battleship from concealment, and because your torpedoes hit like nuclear bombs, you really only need one rack of them to take down pretty much any full health battleship you're going to encounter. Well, a lot of people had hoped that that YOLO style of gameplay might be present in the Italian tech tree line, but it simply isn't. The Italian destroyers, generally speaking, on the tech tree, are not as fast as the Paolo Emilio. They do have rolling smokescreen generators, but their torpedoes are those cliche Italian sea mines. They're slow and they hit like pillows when they make contact. Maybe they'll do 7 8K at best when they hit a battleship. The FR-25, though, is different. It's not as fast as the Paolo Emilio, to be sure, but the hull is based off of a French destroyer. I think the Tier 5 Guepard, or however you pronounce it. So it can get up to around 40 knots with the engine boost going, which isn't slow, especially by Tier 6 standards. It's got 4 charges of the rolling smoke, but crucially, the torpedoes are different. They only have a 6 kilometer range, and they hit harder than the Techline torpedoes. So with this particular destroyer, you really can do sort of the Paolo Emilio thing. And I'm not just saying that because I was able to pull it off one time. You're going to see that multiple times across these two games that I'm showing you. So it's a consistent thing that you can pull off. And that is pretty appealing, I would say. But even more so than that, the Paolo Emilio is sort of a one-trick pony, right? It's got the YOLO torpedo capabilities, but the guns on it, while there are 8 of them, and the HE Alpha is excellent, well, they take about 9 seconds to reload, or something in that ballpark. That's a long time for a destroyer. That kind of reload is much more appropriate to a cruiser. But the FR-25 has a more appropriate destroyer-style reload. Skipping ahead here in the battle, by the way, I'm trying to cut out the parts where I'm just sailing. The FR-25 has a much faster reload, and it also shoots sap. So in the instances where your torpedoes are not going to come in handy, the FR-25's guns will, and they're very good at taking out destroyers. But here, you can see our first YOLO run. We saw the Warspite was headed toward our base, and we knew we had to go and intercept him because we're the only ones around to defend the base. Meanwhile, the rest of our remaining teammates, aside from a single cruiser hugging the map border, are in the enemy's cap. So we got to stop this guy from going to the base. We use our smoke screen to get up into proximity detection range of him, and as soon as we see him, we launch the torpedoes. They're enough to take him out for a dev strike, and that is our first kill of the game. Of course, we still have the Normandy left to deal with, and that is somewhat terrifying considering he's gaining on us, but on the bright side, he's only got one turret on the bow, so hopefully he won't do a lot of damage if he does get to shoot. And our concealment is 5.6 km, so as long as we don't fire our guns, we can sail comfortably out of detection range and go dark. But of course, the Normandy is going to be knocking on the door of our base very soon, so we're going to want to get some torpedoes on him. Meanwhile, the avenging force of 3 battleships that decided to spend the first 5 minutes of this game just sitting in our capture circle, well, they've reached their destination inside of the enemy base, and already one of their numbers has fallen. The other 2 are probably going to follow suit right now because you can see they're in the unenviable position of being inside of the enemy base with no spotting of any enemy teammates because the ships that they're facing are 3 cruisers, which are able to post up behind those islands over there. Well, I guess 2 of them are spotted now, so there's that. But those cruisers are able to post up behind that island, and they've got a destroyer up there that's spotting the battleships for them. So they never really need to be spotted. They can just sit behind concealment and rain down HE on those battleships and burn them down. In other words, there is absolutely no way they're going to take the base, and we are going to lose this game. I've already accepted that, but we can at least maybe get some more action out of these torpedoes. We launch another set at the Normandy. The aim is off, so only 2 of them are going to make contact, but you can see they do a respectable amount of damage, and they start a flood on the Normandy. In retrospect, I kind of wish I had switched to the high explosive to light a fire on this guy, but, hindsight is 2020. At this point, we're going to get back into the cap. We do have 1 remaining teammate, well, actually 2, but we won't count the battleship floating in the red cap. He's going to sink momentarily. Our other teammate, who might actually be able to get something done, is the cruiser behind us. Looks like he has opened fire on the Normandy just as the battleship goes down, and really this is the end of the game. But the reason I wanted to show you this was because of the YOLO runs, and we're about to go on a second one. So we've already got 1 in this game. We're going to pull off another, and then in the next game, we're going to pull off at least 1 more. So that should give you the idea that this thing is pretty consistent in its ability to pull off torpedo YOLO runs. Now, the first one we did against the Warspite was fairly textbook, although in this one, we are going to make a little bit of a mistake. We pop our smoke screen as soon as we get spotted. It lasts for 30 seconds, so that's a good amount of time to close the distance. But of course, we were the only ones spotting the Normandy, so as soon as we go concealed in the smoke screen, we lose our line of sight, and he goes dark. Now we're going straight forward in the position where he was last spotted. That's fine, but it's not as effective as, recognizing that the thing's got an engine and that it's probably still moving toward the left of the screen. So the whole time I'm going forward thinking we should spot this guy at any moment, but of course his engines are still going, so it turns out he's over to the left. No matter, though, we do get a little bit lucky in that the Normandy's guns were not following us for some reason. Maybe he didn't think we were the biggest threat to him. I don't know why, because he's going to eat a face full of these torpedoes just like the Warspite and go down for our second kill and high caliber medal. There's 4 ships left alive. Maybe there's a snowball's chance in hell that we could win this match, but it's simply not going to happen. Not with what comes around this corner, anyway. That's right, it's a Belfast, 6 kilometers away. Of course, he's got radar, and he's got fast reloading light cruiser guns, so we're toast. This is it. The game is over, and we have lost, although we have racked up 100,000 damage, and we did get 2 dev strikes on 2 battleships with these torpedoes, so even though this is a tragic loss, it is, at the very least, proof of concept. We're going to try to run away from the Belfast a little bit, but of course he is going to take us out. And our last remaining cruiser is the Atlanta. I don't really have high hopes for what he's going to be able to do, so we are going to have to move on to the next game. Our last remaining teammate, though, for his part, does manage to sink the enemy destroyer, but obviously he really stands no chance against the Belfast, and even if he did, he'd have two other cruisers to deal with, so this is very much a tragic loss. Speaking of cruisers, though, as we finish out the rest of this game and transition into the next one, that's one thing that can be said about the FR-25 is that it and really the Italian tech tree destroyers, I suppose, don't really have the tools equipped to deal with cruisers except for their torpedoes. They don't have armor piercing, and their sap really cannot penetrate the citadels of cruisers. So if you find yourself 5 kilometers away from a broadside cruiser, you're really not going to be able to take it down very quickly unless you land torpedoes, whereas in other destroyers, you could switch to AP and probably penetrate the citadel. In any case, the second game is on the Sleeping Giant map. We've spawned Alpha, so we're going to go Alpha. The Pensacola nonsensically tells us to get back. This is a terrible idea, by the way, as the Pensacola abandons his flank, goes into the center of the map behind that island over there. He's not going to be very useful for the team, and in fact, we'll meet him later and do his job for him. You'll see that, and that'll show you just how nonsensical it would be for us to have gotten back, especially since two of our destroyers are putting all their eggs in one basket. They're heading toward the Bravo cap, and while they are going to flip it, which is going to be helpful for our team, they're going to go down, leaving us the final destroyer in the game. But we'll be able to pull things back for our team. The results on this game are going to be much less depressing than the last one. Take note of the minimap, though. A red destroyer has been spotted turning into Alpha by our two teammates in the center, so we know we're going to be facing opposition in the form of an Icarus when we enter the Alpha cap, but we don't know if anything else is coming around the opposite corner of the Thunderdome, so this moment is fairly tense as I'm playing this game. I'm thinking anything could come around that corner directly in front of me at any time, and the only support I have is a battleship, which I think is a very slow California behind me. So he may not even be able to shoot at anything that comes around. Luckily, nothing does. It looks like everybody's maybe pushing toward Charlie. And even if something did, I do have the smoke screen to fall back on, so this isn't the biggest risk in the world. But now, our attention must turn to the Icarus as we round the corner into the Thunderdome. We instantly pick up the Icarus. There he is, and this will give you a taste of the efficacy of the FR-25's guns. 4,000 damage on that first salvo. The sap absolutely shreds DDs. There's another 2k, and he's been reduced to well under half health. The only reason he's not dead now is because I don't think all the shells have hit, and we managed to send two into the water there as he turns away and smokes up. Sap, of course, can ricochet, so we get a ricochet there, but that's okay. It's really only going to take maybe one pen to sink this guy. So we're going to charge straight at his smoke screen. There is the concern that he may be launching torpedoes at us, but I suspect he must have already launched his torpedoes because none are forthcoming and the Icarus is dead. That clears this cap. We should be able to flip it with no problems here. And our teammates have managed to flip the Bravo cap, but you can see that one of those destroyers is nearly dead. He's going to be sinking shortly, and, well, the other one's on full health, but he's not going to be on full health for too long. He is also going to sink before this game is over. Meanwhile, we have secured a fairly advantageous position, and the battleship behind us has as well. I think I originally thought it was a California, but it's a Normandy. We've got this Dallas spotted here across the way, and I was thinking that, well, that's a prime opportunity for this Normandy to have a shot on his broadside. So I look over at the Normandy with the camera, expecting the salvo to come, and it never does. The Dallas is going to be able to put himself behind that island, and he's going to get away with most of his HP intact. Very strange. I thought for sure that the Normandy would shoot, but I guess he does have a Leander charging at him right now in the north of the map, so he's going to take care of that cruiser, and he's going to have no problem doing it because it is, of course, British. Now that we have flipped the Alpha Cap, though, and Bravo is flipped, we're just going to sail across the map till we get toward the Charlie side. We're going to sail past the Pensacola, which is now directly in front of us, and try to get some torpedoes on this West Virginia, who the Pensacola is bow tanking. And remember, This was the one that had asked us to get back and retreat earlier on in the game, ostensibly maybe, so that we could come over here and try to bow tank a battleship with 16-inch guns along with him. How well do you think that is going to work out for the Pensacola, also known as the Floating Citadel of Sadness by some people at Tier 5? Well, if you guessed not well, then congratulations, you're basically a prophet. The Pensacola is going to die now. He's still floating, but I think that's the salvo that ends him. Yep, courtesy of the West Virginia's 16-inch guns. Of course, we do get a little bit of vengeance for the Pensacola. Our torpedoes managed to take out the West Virginia, and the rest of the enemy team is basically concentrated over here in the Charlie Cap. It turns out they all basically put their eggs in one basket at the start of the game, so it's a good thing we did go over to Alpha, because we've got 2 caps to their 1, and so we have a points advantage. Even though the situation in terms of ship count is fairly close, the enemy team is only ahead of us by, or we're only ahead of the enemy team by 1 kill. But we're far ahead of them on points, and will stay that way so long as our team doesn't, well, sink while pushing into the enemy team. But of course, this is World of Warships Legends, where it is very difficult to look at the scoreboard and observe that you are ahead of the enemy team by more than 300 points with 2 caps and more ships, so therefore you really don't need to push into the enemy team and die. You simply need to play defensively and hold what you've already taken. Of course, our teammates don't necessarily realize that, so all of them are going to die except for 2 battleships, and this game is going to look a lot closer than it started to look. Now, we had to smoke up. Initially, I did want to push that 1 battleship over there. I think it was a Warspite. But I instantly turned around and went the other way as soon as I saw the Tier 5 Nuremberg turn toward that battleship. Nuremberg is currently pushing toward our location, and of course he's German, so he's got good sonar, rendering any YOLO runs that I may want to do from the concealment of a smokescreen ineffective. If I'm trapped in that smokescreen and the Nuremberg deploys radar, well then I'm going to be perma-spotted for the duration of that radar inside of my smokescreen, and I've got no friendly ships around, so unless the enemy team is shooting at my other teammates, well, I'll be spotted by the Nuremberg sonar inside of my smokescreen, and I won't have any ability to spot what's outside of it. So, anyway, we notice that both the Nuremberg and the battleship have turned around. At this point, we think, alright, well, we can push back in again. It's now safe. And what we want to do is try to get spotting of this Nuremberg and the other battleships for our teammates. We've got 3 battleships left, 1 directly behind me, 1 all the way in the enemy spawn, and 1 heading toward the enemy spawn who is going to sink. There's the Warspite. Looks like he's on fire, courtesy of somebody else, and we're just gonna sort of hold it here for a second as we evaluate what we want to do. We've got torpedoes ready to go, so I think we are going to launch those as the Warspite pushes forward, holding a second as we go dark and dodge one of the Warspite salvos, but it does look like he's committed on that track, so we are going to launch the torpedoes on them. Of course, as soon as we do, that's when the Warspite decides, you know what, sailing in a straight line is a bad idea when I've just spotted a destroyer 6 kilometers away from me. And congratulations, Warspite, you are correct. He is going to dodge those torpedoes, and, well, good for him, I guess, but not good for our damage numbers. Torpedoes, though, I don't think I've mentioned this yet. They do reload quite quickly. It's just over a minute, actually. And this build for this ship is not even a torpedo-focused build. I'm not using the Bergamini guy or the Fugosi guy. I'm using Rizzo, the gunboat commander, in order to get more efficacy out of these sap guns. And even so, the torpedoes reload very, very quickly, even though this is not a torpedo-focused build in any way. By the way, if you look at the number of ships, you'll notice that the enemy team is now ahead of us. They've got 4 and we've got 3. How did that happen? Well, this is World of Warships Legends. Don't question it. In any case, the Warspite is pushing in, and this time we may be able to be a little bit more effective with our torpedoes. The last time we saw the Nuremberg, it did look like he was going in between the islands toward Bravo. At least that's what I was thinking at the time. I was thinking to myself, well, if I'm the enemy team and I'm this far behind on points, but I do have the ship lead, and I'm a Nuremberg of all things versus at least two battleships, maybe I want to go take the cap where they can't see me to provide some use to my team. So I was thinking the Nuremberg here would be a non-issue, and we'd just be able to YOLO the Warspite. So once again, smoke screen. Of course, we are benefiting from the Warspite's smoke firing penalty. He is still spotted. He may even still be spotted anyway if he hadn't just shot his guns. Our other battleship is fairly close. But our smoke screen is about to run out, so we're going to launch one set of torpedoes, but we're going to continue moving forward to get on the broadside of the Warspite to just guarantee that we'll sink him. Although the second rack of torpedoes probably wasn't necessary, and I wish I had saved it for this guy, because he did not do what I was predicting at all. I thought for sure he'd be going toward the Alpha Cap, but maybe he saw me, or he realized where I was at some point, and he decided to come back around and got spotted 3 kilometers away from my smokescreen. Crazy that he wasn't using sonar. The Nuremberg does get sonar, though, right? I don't know. Let me know in the comments. It's been a long time since I played that ship. In any case, he was broadside to our battleship teammate and spotted, so he is dead. That just leaves one destroyer left and another battleship. And we are so far ahead of the enemy team on points right now that it really doesn't matter that the Bravo cap is turning red. Obviously, somebody is flipping it, but there are less than 2 minutes left to go, and my 2 battleship teammates are kind of so far out of position that there's probably no risk of them getting torpedoed by the last enemy destroyer, and I'm pretty sure it's actually the battleship that's in Bravo. I don't even know where the destroyer is at, but he's not going to come into play. He's going to be actually fairly ineffective. So this is pretty much the end of this battle, but because it was 2 games, which, by the way, I did play back-to-back, and you saw examples of the YOLO rush working at least 3 times across 2 games, hopefully this is enough to convince you that this ship actually can be played in this way. It is much like a lower-tier Paolo Emilio, although I would argue it's better. Not better than the Paolo Emilio itself, per se. After all, that is a legendary tier destroyer. Legendary tier destroyer, right? Or tier 7 destroyer, rather. Wow, my gosh, I can't remember the tiers. It is a tier 7 destroyer with rolling smoke, a lot of HP, and armor. And that's fine, but the guns on the Paolo Emilio, because they have such a slow reload, it's not really an effective gunboat. Other destroyers that are less effective gunboats can effectively outgun it, although it does have a lot of HP, so it can take a while. The FR-25, on the other hand, in addition to having good torpedoes that are usable in YOLO runs, also has useful guns. I don't know if you noticed, but we started this last sequence against the West Virginia with 70,000 damage done. We shoot at him just a couple of times, and we rack up a good 12K with the sap. It's quite effective. It doesn't start fires, of course, but the raw penetration is impressive. And this game has come to a conclusion with our win. We're going to be high above the teammates on the leaderboard with 2,600 HP, and that is a result of playing the objectives. Always remember, no matter what destroyer you're going to play, you want to take the caps, and if possible, you want to sink the other enemy destroyers. The FR-25, because of the tools it has, is actually quite good at doing that, and thus I think it is a pretty valuable Tier 6 premium. I put it down after getting it, but I've picked it back up again, and I think I'm going to continue playing it. Hope you enjoyed the video. If so, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.